Good evening, everybody. And breaking tonight, this has been a week in which America has regrettably learned that our worst fears about broken trust and political corruption among officials at the top of the FBI and the Justice Department are real. And the worst of those officials remain in office. Fox News today obtained an early draft of James Comey's statement exonerating Hillary Clinton long before the investigation into her conduct had been completed. 2 months, in fact, before the FBI interviewed her. The draft shows that the term grossly negligence was removed not once, but at least twice. Even stronger evidence that the FBI's Peter Strzok's edits were a clear effort to protect the former Secretary of State from prosecution. We will add to the knowledge of that evidence here tonight. We'll also discuss the shocking corruption at the highest levels of the Justice Department with former Attorney General Michael Mukasey, renowned attorney, Harvard professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz. Also tonight, more evidence of Clinton corruption. Judicial Watch has obtained documents that show Hillary Clinton and top aide Huma Abedin cut an unprecedented deal with the State Department, which permitted them to keep their call logs and their schedules private and hidden, of course, from all investigators. And President Trump remains tonight upbeat about the prospects for tax cuts, even as the health of 2 GOP senators and the cantankerousness of 2 other senators have GOP Senate leaders more than a little anxious. Republican rhinos Marco Rubio and Mike Lee are now threatening to block the tax reform bill unless the child tax credit is expanded. We take up all of the important developments of the day here next. Our top story tonight. As President Trump was inaugurated almost 11 months ago, most Americans very likely thought that the swamp would be at least draining perhaps only a little, but draining by now. We're learning, however, the swamp is much bigger, the corruption it breeds far more entrenched than we ever imagined. And the most recent hearings, investigations, and new documents show political corruption at the highest levels of the FBI and the Justice Department. Fox News has obtained then FBI Director James Comey's draft statement on the Hillary Clinton email probe, a statement that was heavily edited for the purpose of protecting the former Secretary of State. Here now to discuss all of this, the troubling corruption at the DOJ and the FBI, the politically motivated attacks on President Trump by Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his team, Michael Mukasey, a former federal judge who served as Attorney General under President George W. Bush. Judge, it's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
I want to first say to you, I knew things were bad. But when we see a Deputy Attorney General, as Rod Rosenstein is, the effective head of the Department of Justice, say that there is nothing to see here, let's move along, thank you very much, Congress, I was sickened by that moment. I want your thoughts, your reaction.
Well, I didn't watch the hearing.
Right.
In fairness, I didn't see.
Not a bad choice.
Well, I have a day job, so
I understand.
Didn't watch the hearing. I did see some segments, and in fairness, I don't know that I read what I saw as nothing to see here. He did express concern with some things that were disclosed, particularly about Strzok, and that's an appropriate concern. I should say, just parenthetically,
surely,
that it seems to me a little bit odd, notwithstanding that the messages, the texts and emails and so forth between him and his girlfriend were explosive.
10,000 of them.
That those were disclosed when they were private communications. He got thrown under the bus. Now, maybe he deserves to be under the bus.
Are you talking about Strzok?
I'm talking about Strzok.
He was thrown under the bus.
In the sense of disclosing his communications with his girlfriend, absolutely. And if I were working at the Bureau and in the Justice Department, I think I'd be a little bit nervous about whether my bosses were going to do that to me. But in any event, the disclosure that you touched on involving the meeting in McCabe's office, and another disclosure where I think she says to him, it's a good thing that you're around at this time.
To save the Republic.
To save the Republic. Those are extremely disturbing. And Congress has the power to subpoena anything relating to that and to look into it, and they should.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't for even a moment concerned myself, and I think it commends you and your integrity that you would worry about Strzok's constitutional rights, and I'm impressed by that. I'm being very serious. I am so disappointed in the conduct of everyone in the top of the FBI and the Justice Department tonight. There are not words to convey my anger and how deplorable I think the situation is that we face today. And it goes to the issue that the Judiciary Committee, trying to talk with the head of the FBI, the effective head, and he is talking about deferring to the Inspector General. He is saying it's under investigation. When I want the President now to say to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, release all of that information, damn it. And I do want him to say damn it.
Well, I'm sure he doesn't need encouragement from you to say damn it.
Nonetheless.
There is using the Inspector General's investigation as an excuse for not producing documents to Congress is completely bogus. I mean, I was there. I know about IG investigations and so on. And it's one thing to say you don't want to talk about it or make an evaluation of it because the IG is investigating. That's one thing. But withholding documents from Congress is inexcusable. Yeah. And they ought to use their contempt power, if they're so disposed, to get those documents.
My question is, what good is contempt? We've seen what it did with Eric Holder in the Fast and Furious scandal, which was then compounded by a list of a half dozen other scandals, and he was never, there was never any consequence to him. Well, so what would be the effect here?
It's possible that there can be consequences from contempt, and I don't think that any high-ranking official wants to be held in contempt. I know I didn't.
Yeah, I don't think that Eric Holder personally was bothered one whit. Yeah. He was serving a president who he served directly, loyally, and to great effect. We have here an instance in which an Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, can't even be found, who is not honoring his constitutional duties and whose replacement is, in point of fact, blocking the Oversight Committee from completing its constitutional duties.
As I said, the documents ought to be produced, and deferring to not producing them because of an IG investigation is not a sound position.
The two documents the emails that Strzok sent to his girlfriend, his mistress, whatever you want to call her, within the Department of Justice, both went to intent to subvert, intent to alter the outcome of a constitutional election, a constitutionally elected president. This is outrageous, and I don't see a single person in the Justice Department behaving as in any way that suggests they are offended.
Well, I don't know. In fairness, I don't know what they're doing behind the curtain. Mm-hmm. But when somebody refers to a meeting in the office of the deputy director of the FBI as having been the venue for a discussion of ways, apparently of ways in which to frustrate the election of Donald Trump if it came about, that's something that a bright light ought to be shined on pronto.
Yeah, and the irony, I mean, the weight of it all is crushing us as it falls down upon us, as we learn, because we're talking about Russian meddling as the basis of this collusion nonsense that led to the creation of a special counsel. When we're watching our own FBI, our own Justice Department meddle, interfere in a constitutional election, a presidential election. Why isn't that suddenly the interest of Robert Mueller? Why isn't that suddenly the interest of both parties? Not a partisan divide.
I understand. But in fairness, the mandate of Robert Mueller is something that we ought to explore because it's indefinite, and it was, I think that was set up in a way that was not consistent with the regulations that provide for it. But he was told to investigate connections between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Now, there's nothing criminal about their having had connections. If they had connections or links or collusion, if you look at the criminal code, you will look in vain for the word collusion. So that he was never being asked to investigate a crime. He was being told to pursue, according to the letter that appointed him, to pursue the investigation that James Comey referred to in his testimony in front of the House Intelligence Committee. That was not a criminal investigation. It was a national security investigation.
And we have been saying just that from almost day one on this broadcast. So let me ask you, what is it in Washington where we have such weak-minded men and women in Congress, in the Senate, where we have such unprincipled people as the heads of the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House and the Senate committees that are working here? They see that there is no evidence. Richard Burr, Senator of North Carolina, the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, acknowledges we haven't a scintilla of evidence. So we're going to skip that part where we're going to show you early findings, because we have none. We'll just expand the investigation. We have a Congress and a Senate that are being led by some of the most duplicitous and weak-minded people I've ever seen in my life.
That's a pretty harsh.
It is harsh, and I can support it, I think, with considerable evidence.
To quote a famous legal philosopher and former New York Yankees catcher named Yogi Berra, it ain't over till it's over.
Yep.
And obviously
he also said, by the way, Judge, the future ain't what it once was. And it ain't what it once was because of weak-minded, unprincipled people leading in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill.
I agree that we've got a lot of people.
No one thought we would be using Yogi Berra as our philosophical foundation here, but go ahead.
Look, I agree that we got a lot of people there who are not portraits in courage. But I think we have, I hope we have, some people who are reasonably tough-minded enough to see this thing through and figure out what actually happened.
Name one.
Well, I'm hoping that Mueller turns out to be that one.
My God, man. Andrew Weissman.
No, that is a person, by the way, who ought not to be in a position of where he's got control over anybody's life.
I just got started. I'm team member.
You mentioned the name.
Exactly.
Okay.
And put there by Robert Mueller.
Well, everybody makes mistakes. That's why they have erasers on the ends of pencils. And
well,
that
bloody
eraser.
hell, why is there such a low standard for a special counsel and his human-like ways, and such an attack, fierce attack on the President of the United States?
Strzok is working in the Human Resources Department. At the
Great. Now he's deciding who's going to be hired at the...
Well, I'm not sure if he's making any decisions at all.
Well, I'm not sure of anything.
It may very well be that Andrew Weissman ought to be similarly situated. Mm-hmm. His problem is, as you know, that he not only went to a Hillary Clinton victory party, or what was supposed to be a Hillary Clinton victory party, not only wrote a ferociously fawning email to the then acting Attorney General when she committed, as far as I'm concerned, a completely lawless act in refusing to enforce the travel ban. Mm-hmm. But he is also a person who has a long history of abuse of the obstruction statute, in which he brought down a Big 8 accounting firm, only to be told by the Supreme Court that it was overreaching.
At the time, it was a Big 5 accounting firm. It was Arthur Andersen.
Right.
And it was the only time, in my knowledge, and I have researched it to some degree, that any firm was accused of a crime rather than its executives. And the result was 85,000 people losing their jobs.
Right.
These are the kinds of people for whom I have nothing but harsh judgment. And they're likely to get harsher as we find out.
Again, he may deserve a harsh judgment, but I think he ought to be, if he's isolated.
A man of integrity, if Robert Mueller is that man, should he not say this has gone too far and too far afield, and we're going to turn to what we see, and that is a threat to the United States because of the corruption in my special counsel, in the top of the Justice Department, in the top of the FBI.
In fairness, that's not within his mandate. His mandate is to explore what he was.
Integrity
appointed to do.
is always within the mandate of anyone serving this government.
Not a freestanding notion of integrity. I don't want anybody, whether it's Robert Mueller or anybody else, told to investigate lack of integrity as
Why
a
not?
mandate.
They've been told to investigate collusion, and there's no such thing.
Correct.